Hey guys! Welcome to the channel. Here's another crafting video because I seem to be on a roll with making stuff. Last time it was earrings, now it's hairpins. So let's get into it. Going off the Demon Slayer earrings I made last month, I was thinking of another small thing to make. I'm actually part of a club, or org in my case, in my university, and we had an event last month that's constellation themed. Since I had to have my camera on during the entire thing because I have to deliver the closing remarks, I thought it'd be fun to have something on theme and also on brand for me. So here we are, custom space-ish hairpins. I have a bunch of these hairpins from stuff I've done before, so I didn't really need to get new ones. We'll need to paint these later, so I thought it'd be best to sand down the shiny coating of the pins. I brought out my Gundam building toolkit and take out the metal file that came with it. You can use sandpaper too if you don't have a metal file. I put down a piece of tissue under the pin and start filing down the pin. If you're curious, these are actually bigger than normal bobby pins, that's why I can grip them easier. I get these super cheap at a convenience store, that's why I don't mind crafting with them. The size also gives me more surface area for the designs later on, but feel free to use whatever pins you have. While sanding, I also make sure to wipe my fingers, the file, and the pin onto the tissue so I wouldn't be inhaling the small paint flecks that come off when I sand. Would also recommend that you wear a dust mask when sanding anything because you don't want to inhale all that dust the sanding can make. I actually only sand the flat side of the pin because that's the only part that's gonna be seen. And now we're back to the top view of my desk like most of the time I make stuff. My vision for this is to make my own version of like really nice metallic pins with stars on them, so I searched online and looked for shapes to emulate. I of course had to have a moon. I made a thin moon and a thicker moon just to see which style would look nicer on a pin. To draw the crescent shape, I used my normal hand drawing technique of using something circular to draw it out. For the star, I freehanded a star shape and did my best to even out the sides. I had to do it twice because I wasn't so happy with the first one. I cut those out of the scrap paper because these are going to serve as shape templates for the designs to stick onto the pins. With those shapes, I traced them onto a piece of felt cloth, not felt paper. It doesn't work as well on paper. For the star, I found it easier to just mark out the edges of the star than connect the lines after, because holding that small paper in place was going to be really hard to trace over without ripping, so I just go and cut those out. At the last minute, I saw this shape that's kind of like a star, but it stretches out like a sun and kind of like a starburst. I don't exactly know how to describe it. So I wanted to emulate that and I folded my paper in half so I wouldn't have to draw it mirrored. It took a lot of work to cut the shape out because it was so small that I didn't want to cut through it accidentally. Because it had sharp edges, I had to make my cutting very precise so it would be pointed but also not cut through the entire thing. I did the same thing I did with the star where I just added the dots and made the lines over the felt. The pencil marks shouldn't matter for this one because it'll be covered by the mixture anyway. To make these look better than just cut pieces of felt stuck onto pins, I employ my special mixture to help smooth these out. It's basically just a mixture of white glue and baby powder. It seals in the fibers of the felt and gives it a kind of plasticky shell when you have enough layers. So I just brush a layer of that mixture onto the backs of the felt pieces. The mixture will get soaked into the felt. Don't worry, that's normal. You just keep applying it on the front and back. For more details about this, you can check out the earrings video. But for this one, I put 2 coats on the part I'm sticking onto the pin and 5 to 6 coats on the part that's showing. Now we move on to version 2 of the designs. This is what I would consider a little bit more budget friendly but less professional looking. I have some really old Daiso clay and I opened it on camera in next month's video because I recorded that first. I stored that in an airtight bag with some baby wipes covering it. It was already partially dry so I only had to get the usable parts. I had a lot of yellow clay left over from next month's video. Whoa, time travel. So I thought to use it for this one too because it's gonna be painted gold anyway. I sprayed some water on the used to be wet wipes just to keep it fresh until I have to use it again. I sprayed everything, but for this project I'm only using the part I colored yellow. I bring out an old folder which is a lot smoother than my table to roll this clay out. My table has a light wood grain texture and the clay tends to pick that up. Because of the water I added earlier, this Daiso paper clay started to melt and stick onto everything, so I had to wear plastic gloves. To try to cut some shapes out of it, I tried to flatten it with my gloves because I didn't have a legit rolling pin, and used the round pencil I had. I cut out a rectangle of clay using my ruler and make sure that I don't make the clay too thick. An easier way to cut shapes was just to use scissors, so I just had a bit of an issue making the edges look nice because the clay was so old and crumbly. So my first moon looked more like a peach slice than a moon. I thought that I could use my ruler to trim my way into making the star shape because it actually has flat edges compared to the moon, but it also didn't pan out too well. There was no way for me to make the shape that small with clay this old. I even tried using the ruler cut method to get smooth edges and it didn't work. I thought that maybe I could just mold the star out of a ball of clay rather than cut the shape out. For best chances, I sprayed the clay with water to get it to that sticky phase and maybe the clay would crack less and hold together a bit more. I tried and kept trying, but every time I would roll it into a ball, it would just crumble apart. So if you can see, it just looks like cheese curds. Seeing how well the scissors actually did in cutting up the clay, I had a great idea of just letting the clay dry in sheets like the rectangular one I already had and just cut out the shapes later when it's dry. The edges would be clean because it'd be cut with scissors and would have no time to look frayed or cracked. So I just took the small balls of clay and rolled them into flat pieces for later. After 2 days, I take out the flattened pieces and cut them into shapes. I also got the shape pieces and also trimmed those with the scissors too, but it wasn't the best. The clay actually dries to something that feels more like foam, so it's easy enough to draw on it with a pencil and cut it out with scissors because it's super thin. I just cut everything out and I can show you the difference between the ruler cut pieces and the scissor cut pieces. The ruler cut isn't that smooth looking on top and the edges slope downward and look a bit cracked. The scissor cut looks a lot better. The edges are neater and it can be a bit jagged because of the curves. And you also don't have that like slope from the top to the edges. At this time, I also finished coating all the felt pieces off camera. They're the white pieces if you don't already know. But even if they're a bit uneven, they still look smooth and have that like raised look. Now we move on to painting. I got my metallic acrylic paints out and put some painting and drying areas to protect my desk. I start by painting the tops of the pins gold. I was only able to paint about 3/4 of the pin at a time because I had to hold the other side. I also had to be super careful with these because the metal surface can hold on to the paint, but it doesn't hold on to it super well, so you can't really scratch it. I give a coat of gold, then put it aside to dry. I have a lot more confidence and experience painting on the coated felt with my mixture, so I start with those. I go with my favorite, the coated felt narrow moon. The light spark crab looking thingy needed a bit of sanding before being painted because there were bumps on the edges. I did the same to the rest of the felt coated pieces. This is where you get to see how sheer metallic paints actually are because you can still see the white on the star and on the wider moon. After those, I paint the clay pieces. These acted a lot like foam where they would just soak up the paint so fast, so it just looked like a layer of like shiny dust over yellow clay. You can actually see the difference of how the gold paint looks over each one. It gives it a deeper color of the paint compared to the pastel yellow, but it doesn't really give that magical like metallic look. It just looks shimmery instead of metallic. I do the same thing with the silver paint. It's a lot more effort to make the coated felt pieces, so I didn't want to make more of the silver version. I'm more of a gold person than a silver person anyway, so I just painted one pin and one star for now. I spent a lot of time putting more and more coats of paint on the pins and designs just to make sure it's opaque from all angles. I also put a bit of the paint on the backs just in case people can see the back of the pin designs. After all of that's done, I let that all dry. When it's all good, I get my hot glue gun ready. While that's heating up, I go match up the designs to the pins. I start with the silver pins because those aren't my priority anyway. Be super careful with a glue gun because you might burn yourself. I've been burned by hot glue before and it hurts, so please be careful. For the clay pieces, it takes a lot more glue to keep it on, so you kinda have to stick the clay onto the glue right after you placed it so it melts the clay foam and it fuses to the pin. To protect my hand, I fold a piece of paper to put in between the pin and protect my hand from glue overflowing at the back. When I slide the pin off the paper, I add some extra glue to the back to hold it in place. I keep going with all the clay pieces, running the paper through the pin just to make sure that the pin doesn't get blunt. For the coated felt pieces, I basically do the same thing but a bit more working time. Glue sticks well to itself and it's a lot more stable. It's also a lot stronger, so that if the design piece gets pried off, the design won't rip in half. The only issue that pops up is usually the weight of the coated pieces compared to the weight of the clay. Since you start from a flat surface then keep building to make that raised look, it might get heavy. Sometimes when applying the supporting glue, I have to run it through the paper a few times because the glue tends to block the middle of the pin so it won't act as a pin anymore. Sometimes the glue sticks better onto the bare metal than the painted surface, which also tends to fall away. After they're all glued, you're basically done. I hope you guys are liking the more crafty videos on the channel recently. It's a hobby I've had for a while and I love to share it to people. What crafts do you guys want to see next? Leave them in the comments below. If you'd like to see more crafty videos, hit the like button. And if you want to see more videos from me, then hit the subscribe button and the bell to know when a new video's out. I try to upload every week, Monday nights at 8. I guess that's all for this video. Bye guys!